light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I have had quite a number of guests over the years, as well as quite a number of shows where I give thoughts and reflections on various topics. I always feel a little more secure when I have guests, because then there's someone else to help carry the conversation. And yet the curious thing to me, I guess, is that viewers have told me again and again that they prefer the episodes in which I speak on my own and don't have a guest. And maybe my intuition is doing something I'm not realizing, but in most cases, I try to speak with a guest ahead of time and see if we are communicating effectively, if there's some understanding, and that we want to dig deeper into whatever topic it is, and virtually any topic, everything from people with disabilities to quilts to Islam, any number of things. And that's where when people ask me what the show is about, I say, well, it's about life and spirituality in any facet. And these are multidimensional, multifaceted phenomena. And yet, sometimes there are surprises that I talk to somebody beforehand and I attempt to explain everything, and then they show up to do the show and the conversation goes in weird directions that I can't necessarily follow. There was one woman who wanted to be a guest, but anticipated a daily news show of some type. And I had to explain to her that, no, I try to make the content of each show timeless, so that whether you're watching it now or 20 years from now, the information will still be relevant. And one of the things she mentioned, for example, was the theory that certain vaccinations are the cause of autism. And her experience very much supported that. And yet I know there are many, many other experiences that don't. In trying to examine that myself and figure out what is the answer, that I found out there really wasn't one. The tests that have been done, if I understand correctly, confirmed that vaccines by themselves could not cause autism. But since the causes of autism are still unknown, even at this time, it raises the question of whether or under what circumstances vaccines may have played a role. And we don't know. Because we don't know the cause of autism, we can only say that they can't cause it in isolation. So it's not only that, but it may be that and something else. But then again, there are people who have avoided vaccines who still developed autism. So the other question is whether there is a single cause of autism or not, or if there are multiple causes. And under what circumstances may a vaccination contribute to the development of autism? I don't know. These are very complicated, multidimensional things that we'll never really know the answer to. I think they're things that should be discussed, but they need to be left open-ended because we're still learning. And, in the future there may be somebody else who wants to present a particular perspective, and we'll need to once again saying, that's a perspective, but there's another perspective here, and the truth is somewhere between the two, but we don't really know. And I guess it raises the question, is there anything about which we can truly say that we have the final answer, that we know? Once and for all, we know. And I don't know if there is, because even with quantum physics, that's a very new phenomena, and people thought the laws of physics were set in stone, so to speak. And then somebody discovered quantum physics, and they had to rewrite so many things. I have friends who believe that life on Earth originated in outer space, but I also have acquaintances or people I've read who they try to put forth a theory or a history of the Earth as if it was evolutionary, derived by evolution, and that this led to this and so on. And there are certain things they can't explain, but they're not willing to dismiss their theory yet. And I kind of shrug and say, well, it could be one, it could be the other. there are so many things that fall into the category of things which can be neither conclusively proven nor conclusively disproven. But it does mean that if new information becomes available, there might be a situation in which historians have to rewrite huge sections of history because what they have discovered changes what came before. Supposedly, for example, just to cite an example that I don't know will ever be proven or disproven, but an example cited to me at one point was that there was a secret room between the paws of the Sphinx in Egypt, and that there were things in this room that related to some history of which humanity in general is completely unaware. And that supposedly they finally got permission to use a seismograph to test whether the room was really there. They found it was. Then it was opened, photographed, and emptied. And God knows what happens to the photographs. And what they found in the room, I have no idea. But it would, according to the initial theorist, it would compel Egyptologists to rewrite the history of Egypt if they knew what was in that room. But it's one of those things that can be neither proven nor disproven conclusively, because we don't know what was in the room, we don't know what history it compels, and I don't know that, to me, it's not such a bad thing that Egyptologists might have to rewrite their history from time to time. But the additional part of that, and it's not just Egyptologists, it may be everybody who has to rewrite their history from time to time. Because in my understanding, I heard the term indigenous person last week, and I kind of dismissed the term because I don't know that anyone is truly indigenous. I don't know if we all started in the Middle East and migrated from there, if we all started in northern Africa where they discovered a skeleton they named Lucy, or if we all started in outer space. I really don't know. And I don't know that it will really change my life one way or the other. But it would be interesting to know at some point, but just interesting. I have enough other things to deal with in the meantime. But with that in mind, if that's where life started, if life started in any of those three places, that makes virtually everyone on the entire planet not indigenous. It is simply a question of how far back you go. You can say we've been here for 10,000 years, but somebody else may have come before us. Or we may not have been here 15,000 years ago. Perhaps nobody was here 20,000 years ago. I don't know. And I have no way of finding out. And I don't know that it really matters as long as we're willing to be ourselves. If we live with integrity and we're willing to be ourselves, and we have stories, and there is some kind of moral or emotional truth in them that serves to guide us to being better people, to me that's good. We don't need to have, there's no authority to be derived from the fact that one's ancestors were here 20,000 years ago or more, or that one's ancestors have been here forever. We are truly indigenous. Well, to be truly indigenous, you literally sprang from the ground. And I don't know that that has ever happened. I'm sure it's possible under some set of circumstances, but I can't imagine what they are. And so, to me, it doesn't really matter whether or not someone is indigenous. It matters whether or not someone is being him or herself, whether someone has integrity, whether there is a respect for that person, their beliefs, their boundaries, their choices. If there is no respect, that's the first problem. If there is no honesty, that's the first problem. Lying is always a problem. There is no problem that lying won't make worse. And in a similar way, a lot of people refer to alcoholic beverages, and I keep joking that there is, half seriously, because it really is true, there is no problem that being drunk won't make worse. All that being said, it still leaves us in the moment we're in saying, okay, tell whatever story you want, but in this moment, we're here, I'm here, who are you, who am I, and are we respecting each other's personal boundaries, or are we deciding who is more or less important? For me, it kind of all falls into the same basket, so to speak, because I look at relationships as very egalitarian. And whether someone is rich or poor, or a particular race or a particular religion, or where they came from, or how long they've been in whatever place, they're a person. If they have integrity, I have no problem respecting them and viewing them in an egalitarian, equal side-to-side sort of manner. If someone wants instead to try to convince me that relationships are hierarchical and they're better than I am, the first thing I will challenge them is, does that mean you behave better than I do? That you're more honest than I am? That you're more truthful? That you are more generous than I am? Because if you're not all of those things, I don't consider you to be better than I am. If you want to be better than me, you're going to have to be a better person than me. If you're not going to be a better person than me, then this hierarchical notion of relationships I find more problematic than empowering, because it places people in positions and encourages them to abuse power rather than use it wisely. Wisdom is not confined to the bottom or top of a ladder. Wisdom is inherent within each person, but can be further developed. And on that note, I come back to Einstein's quote about only two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. And I kind of wonder, if you meet a genuinely stupid person, it seems to me in most cases, if I'm going to use the word stupid, it generally involves choice. It's not just that this person is ignorant or uninformed or uneducated. They are choosing a rigid, narrow, small way of perceiving and understanding that neither serves them nor the people they encounter with any great effectiveness. So in a similar sort of way, if we're going to use the word indigenous in a hierarchical sense, that basically means that I'm not allowed to say certain things to this person who may need to learn, and this person may want to say things to me that I know are not intelligent because I've tested them already in my own life and found them wanting, found them insufficient. If someone wants to ascertain, for example, that the world is flat, and there are some flat earthers and they have an explanation, but having read bits and pieces of it, I don't find it compelling. So having traveled from the United States to Europe to Australia, I've been in an airplane, I've traveled around the earth. I'm convinced that it's spherical in nature. That's based on my own experience, but I really don't see how compelling someone to believe this way or that way is really going to change anything, because in the final analysis, it comes down to whether we can love each other, whether we can respect each other, whether we can respect each other's boundaries, and ultimately whether we can collaborate in the accomplishment of further good. That all the good that exists in the universe or in the world is not the extent of all there can be, but instead all the good that can be is greater than all the good that has ever been, because there are still good things that haven't happened yet. It's kind of like asking, what are the limits of wisdom? And knowing that all the wisdom that can be is much greater than all the wisdom that has ever been. On a similar note, but bridging in a different direction, I often think of the burning of the Library of Alexandria, a historical event, and considering that it was the greatest library in the world at that time, I have to wonder what was there that we have forgotten, and how the world was plunged into at least Europe was plunged into what is called the Dark Ages after that, and how much wisdom was lost, and how much could not be taught to the next generation because of the scrolls that were burned in that library. And what did they know that we're still remembering, and that we may or may not ever rediscover? I don't know. It's fascinating to consider, and yet it's one of those unanswerable questions too. It's something that can be neither proven nor disproven. Coming back to my television show and the range of guests I've had on the show, in a similar sort of way, I try to present a topic for us to discuss, and we're fascinated by the possibilities, and that's really where I like to center the conversation. But there's also recognizing that there is so much that is not known, and there is also that part where some wish to represent a particular perspective, that this is what they want believed. Whether or not humanity will ever believe that, I don't know. And I find it interesting, so I have a conversation about it. But to me, every single conversation has been open. The disappointing thing for me, I guess, is when I've had guests on the show, and we've even had wonderful conversations, but afterward, because I don't subscribe to and become indoctrinated or affirm everything about what they believe or want to embrace, we wind up having to part ways because they have a perspective and I have a perspective, but mine is forever enamored with questions. Theirs may be forever enamored of answers, and I don't find their answers satisfactory, and so I try to tell them that I accept that that's how you understand things. I understand that that's the tentative conclusion you've given yourself and an answer that you hold to, and that it is empowering to you, and I hope that it continues to be empowering to you. I don't find it empowering, so I'm not applying that answer to my life. And there were a number of shows I did at one point with, and I suppose you might see the show someday, and I mean no disrespect, but I thought it was an important subject to discuss, and so we did a number of shows on various aspects of Islam. And I thought they were very good discussions, and they really should be watched and considered. I don't know that we should ever, at the time I thought of him as a friend, but I don't know that he's remained so, because as time has gone on since then, there have been a number of times where I attempted to talk to him, and I get the impression that maybe he didn't actually approve of gay people at all, but the reason that he was willing to have that dialogue with me was to encourage people to think about Islam in different ways. The challenge of that, of course, is that the comments that he presented on that in each of those shows were his comments, and he was not, I don't think, at any point portrayed as representing all of Islam. And I'm sure there are quite a number of Muslims who would disagree with him openly. And his title of Imam meant absolutely nothing to them, that they would still have a disagreement. And to me, that's fine. I don't know if it's fine to him or not. And I find it disappointing that he was unable to create a friendship that transcended religious boundaries. And yet, in his understanding of Islam, friendship across religious boundaries may not be a possibility. So, when I have guests on the show, it's to explore questions, and it's to wrestle with questions and to suggest possibilities and to invite their perspective, to invoke a perspective, and talk about that perspective in ways that perhaps public discussion has frequently not. At no point in time am I saying this guest is the authority, these are the only right answers, or anything else. I don't know if there are any right answers that are the only right answers. There are answers, feelings and convictions to which I come, and to which I hold. But I would not pretend for a single moment that they are the only possibilities for convictions and beliefs and ideologies. The point, however, is not to have the correct ideology as to have an ideology. And like my master's level theological course, Theological Imagination and Construction, to think things through and to figure out, if I object to this, what do I propose putting in its place? And if I propose putting something positive, something better in its place, what am I willing to do to make that happen? It could be, and do I believe in my answers enough to even sacrifice my life for them if I was ever called upon to do so? If, for example, it was World War II and a Nazi submarine landed outside my Pacific Coast home and demanded something or other, would I, like Bedamps and broomsticks, anything at my disposal to stop them? Because ultimately it's not about whether I live or die, but it's about whether or not the larger world of which I am part survives also. That it's not just whether or not I'm in the military, but whether or not I have any way with which to combat the Nazi threat in that particular hypothetical situation. In that sense, I suggested to somebody once that every politician And every citizen of this country needs to be willing, if it comes down to it, saying, you will give us a way to attack your country, that instead we, as loyal citizens of our country, say, if you attack my country, you will not do it through me. And if that means sacrificing my life, then I will do so. But the principle remains that you will not attack my country, you will not attack me. If I have anything to say about it, this is not going to happen. Rather than simply being narcissistic and thinking, if I survive, it's good, even if my country does not, even if everyone around me does not, to instead say, I am what I am, I stand for what I stand, I have principles, I have beliefs, and whether it's me or whether it's someone else, it kind of reminds me of an episode of Star Trek where there were some energy beings that took possession of some people on the Star Trek Enterprise, and I don't remember if they were actually, I think they might have been staff members, but in any case, they came up with a situation in which the beings and the humans would be sucked into outer space and exterminated in order to liberate the ship. And the alien talked to one of the women and said, you wouldn't kill yourself in order to do this. And the woman looked back at him and said, I would gladly sacrifice my life to save my child, without hesitation. And once they understood the sacrificial love that existed, the aliens basically surrendered and gave up because there was nothing with which they could fight. In a similar sort of way, I try to have shows that provoke people's thinking. I try to come back to that point of saying, I am what I am. I will live with integrity or I die with integrity, but either way I will have integrity. And I will be me, and I will not be your puppet. I will not be manipulated. And so in having guests that are willing to wrestle with the questions and think things through, to encourage my viewers to also be people who think things through, who are willing to take a stand for what they believe in and willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that good gets done. I recently voted in a mail-in ballot, and I was kind of disappointed in some of the positions being the person was running unopposed, and it wasn't someone for whom I wanted to vote. But there was no opportunity for the lesser offices to do a write-in ballot. Only for certain high offices could I do that, and I did. But the question in my mind that comes up again is, if the good people don't run, only the bad people will. And who are the good people who will run? And in that sense, or on that note, I was looking at thinking, well, if nobody else will take the job, I'd be willing to also. But I didn't know beforehand that there was a problem of not having sufficient candidates, that this person was running unopposed. Otherwise, I would have had my own name put on the ballot. And if there were enough people who wanted to vote for anyone except that person, I might have been elected. And would I be intelligent enough to deal with the challenges it involved? I think I could have learned. I think I could have found trustworthy people to ask, and I could have compared different things and made wise choices that best served the people who elected me. Because ultimately that's what it would come down to. What best serves everyone, not just what best serves my personal interests. And I guess in my humble opinion, I would love to get to the point where there are no career politicians, where it is all of us putting our heads together and coming up with better solutions. And that ultimately is what having a guest on the show is all about. Whether we can put our heads together and come up with a better solution than either of us could on our own. How do we do that without having dialogue and finding out what the other person knows and how the other person sees something that is different from the way we see the same thing? And if I get thrown into a position that politically and economically and professionally is way beyond me, I can still ask questions, I can still learn, I can still oversee the position and contract out the specific skills in whatever ways I need to while bearing in mind the fundamental goal of who elected me and what best serves them. And if they elected me specifically, they want me in that position, but they don't want me to be a puppet of only their whims. It's not a question of playing king of the hill and who gets to write the rules now. It's a question of figuring out what is the win-win situation. What is the thing that creates the greatest relationship I have with everyone around me? And what is the thing that creates the most empowering relationship that I have with that which is truly divine? As opposed to that which churches and synagogues and religions and individuals say is the divine. I don't know that I'm in any position to say what the divine is or not, but I trust that if one is seeking the divine will manifest itself in whatever way is most appropriate to that individual. And that somewhere in the midst of all that, in a spiritual, soul level, invisible kind of growth, something will happen that each of us can be more of a person, more in wisdom, more in love, more in generosity and kindness and goodness and industriousness and inventiveness than we have ever been in the past. And in that sense, the future always has the potential of being greater than the past, but only if we allow it to be. Thank you very much for watching this show.